and welcome back to the DMGB conversation, where the DMGB stands for Doesn't Matter, Get Better. Super excited to have my next guest on the show. He is the leader of the Sales Rebellion. He is the host of the Selling Local podcast. He is a guy who I met through the LinkedIn world and through my network of Noodleberg connections. He knows my father very well. But super excited to welcome Dale Dupree to the conversation. Dale, welcome.
Brett, what's up? Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, it's awesome. I'm really glad to have you here. I'm excited for where this conversation will go. But the way we usually start is I allow the guests to kind of just give the overview of who they are, where they came from, what they're doing now, and kind of what got them there. So give us the Cliff Notes version of your story.
Yeah, it's so hard to give the Cliff Notes version of your story, but I've done it so many times now that I'm pretty good at it. So it starts back in 1984 with my father when he started his copier firm. It's important that we start there because I was born a year later with toner running in my blood, as they like to say, which is what brought me into the B2B space. I toured a band at 17 years old, rebelled against the idea of like working for the family business and being part of that system and getting stuck, in Orlando kind of concept. And in the process of building a band and getting into the music industry and doing that was a lot of fun. I had a blast, man. It was probably one of the greatest memories that I have of coming up and building something. But at the same time, too, I slowly realized that it was not what I wanted for my life. It did not have the type of environment that I wanted to build a family in. It did not afford me a lot of flexibility because it was on the road all the time to be able to make money, to be able to sell CDs, to be able to get recognition, to be able to end up, on a radio station somewhere on MTV doing something, right? And like it was a good hustle, but I recognized that it took a lot away from the idea of me being able to give back to people. Instead, all I was really asking for was for people to give to me. And so it wasn't fulfilling from that perspective. Getting on stage though in front of 1,000 people and flying into the crowd and watching people like half murder each other to your music is a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, but something was calling me home. And so on the way back to that calling, I stopped by my dad's office, right? And I ended up working there when I first came back into the working world. Suffered through 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010 with him. And it just started rolling. It was like year after year and I hadn't done anything different. And then about 2010, it clicked and my sales just lit on fire. And I revived our company that was on life support from the economic downturn, took us to a much better space. And in 2012, he was so profitable that he was able to sell the business for a very good chunk of change to be able to put him into a good space to retire. And he had gotten sick and started to get sick and ended up getting diagnosed with cancer, which became terminal, and we ended up losing him. And so it was just those stars aligned concept, bro. And it all starts in 1984 when he decided to start that business.
That's
because
amazing.
I ended up staying in that space, right? And becoming what I am today, which is the leader of the Sales Rebellion and pushing against the idea of what sales has been stereotyped as, and building something much more altruistic towards servant leadership and giving back to our communities through our profession.
Cool. I mean, actually, that's an amazing job. That's hands down the best job anybody's ever given of a Cliff Notes version. You hit so many things there. What kind of gave you, why music? When did you fall in love with music? Why did you start music? And what was the genesis of that? And where did it go? What kind of band? I mean, you said half kill each other, so I'm assuming there was some kind of metal involved there where there were heavy mosh pits going on.
Yeah, it was a heavy metal band for sure. And it was a genre called hardcore music in its origins, which was kind of it stemmed from punk rock. And It was like an amalgamation of punk rock and metal where it was very fast paced, very heavy, but it was also kind of its own thing where the crowd that you brought out were gangs, like it was very hardcore people and it was intense, but there was a Christian scene inside of it, which was my band. We were a Christian band. And
oh, wow.
So one of the things that I wanted to do was to be in ministry as well too. But I'll tell you what attracted me to music was, this is going to sound, I mean, it just always ties together. Like I always say to people when I tell these stories that like I didn't make all this up just to try and force my father into everything that I do. It's just those things that when you can look back and reflect that you go, man, it's wild the life that I lived in comparison to my dad, even,
Yeah.
and how being intentional in your choices will really literally not just leave your legacy, but it will mold the legacy of your kids if you're
For
focused
sure.
on it. My dad was a musician, bro. He played guitar, he played in a band,
Really?
and he played it my whole life. And so he let me play an acoustic. I started with piano, then I played an acoustic, and he told me at 12 years old that if I got good enough, that he would get me an electric. And at 13, he bought me my first electric guitar, and the rest is history, dude. So
That's crazy. So at the point where you were ready to get out, because I imagine that was a dream, right? And you're hustling for that dream. You're playing at shows, you're on tour. I mean, most bands would consider that successful in the world of music. You know what I mean? Like, you're not top of the charts, but you're playing, you're traveling, you're doing. It's not like you're just trying to get off the ground. So what was that like, for you to have the decision that you wanted to get out and dealing with the other band members? And like, that's not just a decision you can make on your own. Like, especially if you're running the band, like you're responsible for those people. So what did that feel like?
it was interesting. In the beginning, it was that I was going to juggle the two. And so I stayed partly in the band and was still recording the next album that we were putting out. And we were on Warner Brothers Music Group. So we were on a major record label. We weren't, just peddling CDs on, a record label. We started ourselves. Like, it was big time stuff. We were in stores all over the world. People that are old enough will remember things like Best Buy having CDs, and things like Virgin Megastore, right? Where they
Virgin
had
Megastore,
actual
sure.
CDs. Yeah. So we were in all those places. It was fun to be like, in another state somewhere and like walk into an FYE and see your CD and to sign
FYE,
autographs.
that's a name drop. FYE,
Yeah,
that's
a
a
good
name
one.
drop.
So it was a dream. It was amazing, and I'll never forget it, man. But it was a struggle. I was a violent person at that point in my life, and really it was just that anger had taken over everything else in it. That I needed an outlet for my depression, and I found it in anger. And so I enjoyed, fisticuffs with random people at a show, and it was bad because that brings harm more than it does anything else. And it's one thing to be like, in the pit with your friends and like you get hit and it's all good, but I was out there throwing bows and kicking people in the face, and I was at home like learning how to do that better by going and taking jujitsu and Muay Thai. So it was bad.
Your craft for the mosh pit.
Yeah, exactly. I was a master mosher. So the idea for me was that I started to reflect and inflect on the why. Why am I doing this? Am I doing it for Jesus still, like I started, or am I doing it because I want some kind of self-gratification around things that are harming other people? And man, it was a journey, bro. I mean, in the process of going like part-time, we actually got another guy to sit in for me to go on tour because I was the vocalist. So we got another guy to sit in for me and go on tour. And I would be back home working and kind of juggling those two things. But in the process, I started to, again, as I'm doing stuff, started thinking like, man, I need to start calling people and apologizing. And so I started this basically this renaissance. And I picked up the phone and I had a bunch of people that I owed apologies to, and that I needed to at least ask for forgiveness, not demand it. And it was during that time that I started to wake up. And the thing that did it all end for me, bro, was, not that there weren't drugs around all the time, but when I found out that one of the members was on heroin, it was about the time that I said, this is going to be it. And we're going to stop.
Not what it was. Got it.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. So, and forgiveness is such a powerful thing. I mean, obviously you hold your faith tight to you, and that's, an unbelievable thing for people, but forgiving yourself before you're able to ask forgiveness of other people, you know what I mean? It's a two-way street of like, hey, look, I know that I did wrong. I'm trying to forgive myself of this, and then having the ability to ask somebody else for that forgiveness and understand that that's their prerogative. Like, they don't have to, they can do whatever, but you're doing your part by saying, hey, I know that I did wrong and I'm sorry. And I hope that, that's awesome. So what a revolutionary moment for you. So born with toner in your blood, right? So, and look, there's sales involved in everything we do. I talk about this with all the people all the time. Like, the fundamental of sales is the fundamental of being a good person, right? Like being able to communicate and being selfless and wanting to deliver value and have influence over other people. That's the real qualities of sales that make people great. So you had those things because you grew up with that kind of father and then had to build it your own way in music. Why then jump back into the family business and not do something else immediately?
Yeah, the truth is that when I jumped into the family business, I ended up getting 2 other jobs as I came away from the band. And one of the reasons was because I went to my dad, I wrote him a letter and I said, I'd like to explore working for you since I turned this down for so long. I turned everything down that he offered me, and it doesn't haunt me because I was able to be very transparent about my decisions and accepting of them, and also asking of forgiveness around them as well too, like I was just discussing and you were just reflecting on as well. But in the beginning it was this thought of maybe I could go and work for him, and it could be something that turns into something bigger. So what attracted me to it more than anything was like, I loved my dad, man, even in the process of rebelling against, the whole idea of working for him, because I was skipping college anyway. I was 17. It was like, go on tour or go to college. And that was it, dude. I went on tour. So sitting back and like looking at the whole thing, I know that even the moment that I said I'm going to go on tour, that in my heart, bro, I had this feeling that there would be a time, that there would be and not necessarily of repentance, but of just that prodigal son concept of just like coming home. There'd be a time that I needed to go and I needed to get my sea legs. And I learned a lot, man. I learned how to run a business with a bunch of nerds, that were, doing their thing with 6 other people, right, doing their own thing. It's real. It's like you said, like you can't just decide to break a band up. Like at one point it became a family, but in the beginning it's just like, who are these people?
Right.
Like in the beginning. So it's an intense thought, but I worked 2 other jobs when I stopped the band. I worked 2 other jobs hustling, dude. I was just trying to make money at that point, to dig myself out of being like literally living in poverty at that point to an extent, other than having the aesthetics, like having a place to live, right? Like it was
having
6 months of not making a mortgage payment, bro. So I went through the hard stuff, and my dad's business did too. But I think that you can relate to that it wasn't about safety as much as it was about like being a champion alongside my dad more than anything, like
being in the foxhole with him and being able to build with him. And so 2 questions for that time, because unbelievable timing that you get out and then like it's a struggle for those 4 years that you're really trying to build. And that's hard. Like not only are you struggling because, this is a new thing, but like you're in an entirely new industry. Like it's not like you just moved jobs. Like you went from music to sales. And so like you're trying to build a new career, and you're doing it at a time when it's already hard and the business is going through it. What were some of those things that got you through that time? What was the foundation that got you through that with your dad and yourself?
I would say that like my evolution of reconnecting with myself in those moments, like allowing myself to go back to things like my depression that I struggled with, being accepting of my suicide attempt, being able to start to speak about it even a little bit more. At the time, I'm much more open about it now, but kind of privately talking to people about it more, and coming to terms with a lot of the things that were that were happening around me being okay, because I couldn't control them either. So there was this evolution of reaffirming who I was during that process, like re-engaging and getting back in touch with my creative side, which is what created the musician in me. That I started in the beginning when I was with him, I was, suited up and looking snazzy. And I slowly started to realize like, that's like putting on a mask. I mean, look at me right now. I'm sitting, in a button down and a hat, I mean, that's how I roll. Right. Yeah. So and this is who I am. And so it was just this very slow realization that Dale is good enough, and that being able to accept myself was okay. And being critical of myself was okay too. Right. But that acceptance, I think that was a huge piece of the puzzle in those moments of like becoming successful and realizing that even dude, even though we were eating, just garbage, like dirt, literally like sucking dirt down every night, that it was like the best dirt you could ever eat because it was an experience that I never had to go back to, but that I also got to take with me for the rest of my life.
So that's what you're talking about right there, the acceptance of who you are and being able to understand how to then use that and play to your own advantage of, okay, I'm accepting who I am. Now, how do I let myself come through? And then the creativity piece, talk to me about how you applied that to your sales structure or your sales process, because I know that that's what made you successful, because that's what makes salespeople successful. Sales professionals that are creative and find different ways to communicate and that are comfortable in their own skin and not trying to be somebody else are always the ones that build the best relationships. So how did you use that?
So the first thing that I did was I allowed myself to become vulnerable. I sat back and said, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to do things that make you uncomfortable as well too. And that if they don't turn out the way that you want them, you can't control that anyway. So why worry about it? And I think it was that base and the mindset that I created around it that really allowed me to then wake up and say, well, what if I made my brand the copier warrior? And what if I wielded a sword? And what if I, slayed bad service and conquered, poor sales experiences and that I, annihilated high prices. And, I came up with all these concepts around this warrior aspect, and it tied back into also the idea of like, what is a warrior? And so a warrior in true form is a defender, so a king sends his best knight to defend the castle. He doesn't send him out because he's like, go conquer the lands. At the end of the day, all they're really trying to do is protect what they have. And I think it's a misconception, right? So I started to realize misconceptions inside of my creativity about sales. And I thought, well, how can I even take the stereotypes and misconceptions and kind of blow them out of the water and make people laugh? And so I had marketing pieces like me stabbing, swords through copy machines. I had crazy stuff like me fighting a copier, like, I was on the front cover of Mortal Kombat, right? Like I did all kinds of crazy stuff that made people relate to it, find familiarity through it, but also to say salespeople are boring and you're not. Right. Salespeople are not relevant. All they are is a cheap price at the right time, right? That was in the copier world, especially, right? And because I was this experience, I was walking into places that would tell you, now we've been with our guy for 20 years, and they were looking at this stuff going, maybe we should talk to him just in case. Right? That's all I needed. That's all I truly needed to be able to kind of awaken the warrior in me and become that or head toward that legendary status that my father had. But I'll tell you, the biggest ingredient, bro, is this idea of when I started to look at the vulnerable side of me and I started to look at what that truly was, is that it was okay for me to find fulfillment in other things, not just money and commission checks, but in servant leadership. And watching my dad all my life become a servant leader, and not just become, but just like teach me how to be one, I should say, because he was a natural at it. From hiring people out of the prison systems to pulling over on the side of the road with me and my 13-year-old sister in the car and letting a hitchhiker in the middle of Titusville, Florida, like not a safe place, right?
Whoa.
Right, like all these.
I'm not condoning that. I'm not condoning that. I don't want people to be like, "Oh, servant leadership. Pick up the hitchhiker." Look, like that, you're on your own there.
Yes. But my dad would always say, trust the voice inside of you that tells you to do things. And I think that's what really made it an activity for me and made what it was that I accomplished the reality that it became. Because instead of saying, oh, I can't say that, I can't do that, I can't try that, I did it all. If I felt it and the little voice inside me said, do it, I did it.
So I want to continue this and I want to carry it forward, because it was obvious that you were willing, once you got vulnerable and you were willing to be creative, you used the tools that you had at your fingertips in order to be able to look different, sound different. I know you through LinkedIn. I know how you use LinkedIn. I know what you've done. When did you see LinkedIn as a tool to use? Were you early to the party? Were you late to the party and just applied your own creativity? When did you really start building on social media the way that you use it now?
Yeah, so I got on LinkedIn in 2013. and I used it as an outreach tool in the beginning, not so much a content space, but an outreach tool in the beginning to be able to kind of get into through the back door to my buyer instead of having to deal with the front ops. And then I could be a lot more clean and clear and crisp with the front, because I could just show up with donuts after I set the appointment with the guy in the back, and this person wouldn't feel like I had gone around them and that I was trying to bribe them to get to them. And so I could naturally build relationships with people because of it. And so I started there with it, but I started posting. You could scroll back to 2015 to start finding posts, but consistently you'd find them in 2016, once a week. And then 2017 is when it kicked off. But I'll tell you, in 2016, like what made me start posting weekly and using Twitter as well too, is that I was meeting with people, and or people were calling me and going, yeah, you're the guy that's on my LinkedIn every day when I log in. And so imagine a territory in the middle of Florida, right? That there's not a lot of people that even know, the Space Coast and in general, right? Except for guys like me and you that live here, right? But imagine that territory has got 400 people on it that are buyers that are on LinkedIn, right? Yeah. And that's it. And imagine that there's some salespeople, but they're all there for resume placement, right? And you're the only person inside of these like 20 connections that this person has, or 100 connections that this person has, posting content. Suddenly you're live all the time, and they're consuming you, and they're either motivated by it and they become part of your tribe, or they don't like it. Right. And so you kind of kill two birds with one stone in that sense as well too. So
that's amazing. So then when did it become the sales rebellion? When did being the copier warrior and family business, we've lifted, dad is selling it, great. When did it really become the mission of, I no longer want to represent a single service or product. I really want to affect the sales game far beyond, to teach people what I've learned and done?
Yeah. So 2012 we sell, and I became the #1 rep overnight at the new firm. And they had an outstanding sales team already. At one point I heard that there was a bet on the table. I believe it too, that I'd be fired in like 90 days because I was daddy's boy, and then daddy kept me employed, and it was pretty interesting here. But it actually fired me up even more. And I won all the awards. I hit the $1 million club, multiple times. I was a $1 million producer, and I basically took that company over, and I became their top guy, but then I became their VP of sales. And when it became the rebellion, like deep inside of me, bro, it was right after my dad passed away. They promoted me to VP of sales, and it was honoring to me because I thought, wow, it's awesome, because they gave me the branch that my father cultivated and created. They gave it to me. It was mine. And so I never owned that, right. But it felt close in those moments.
Right.
And a fire lit up in me, dude. And I hired a crew of people, and they were rock stars, man. There was a couple, sour apples, but they were still producers. And we created an inclusive culture. We didn't say like, let's get rid of these people. We accepted them, and we tried to build on them, right? And anybody that came to that front door that was looking for mercy and grace, bro, for anything to get them out of their current situation, we were open to it. And so I built a gang of misfits, dude. And I took guys that were making $30,000 a year to making 80, 90, $100,000 a year. And in the process of watching that happen, I started to recognize something. I was like, wait a second, it's not just that I'm good at this, I can teach this. And so I built a system. And in the process of building that system, I did an upward lateral move to Xerox, directly to Xerox. At the time, it was called Global, which was owned by Xerox essentially. But basically, a bunch of conglomerate companies like all over the United States, keeping their individual name to make them look local, and they weren't, right? So that's sales for you, everybody. Welcome to the game. Right? So, I just told people I worked for Xerox when they asked.
Right. Keep it simple. Keep it simple.
So I had fun over there, and I ran a pretty big team, and I recognized there just how, because I had a really good culture at my company, and at that company, at that particular branch I was at within Xerox, it was not good. The culture was not the best. And I was.
Why do you think that was?
I'll tell you from a very professional perspective that it was because there was a disconnect between leadership and then also departments. But from a personal perspective, I'll tell you that it's because people are selfish. They want nothing but to make sure that they keep their job and that they get their marks and that they get their promotions. They don't care about the prospect. They don't care about the client. They definitely don't care about their coworkers. There's probably 50% of the people there. That's how I felt about them. And it wasn't that it was me projecting that onto them. It was them doing it to me, right? Like, okay, I see that you don't care. Even going to like HR and telling them about issues and never having them resolved or come back. Yet other people or other employees that were either that had a different race than me or a different sex than me, if they reported something, all of a sudden the whole place was on fire. And mostly just because they didn't want to get sued or whatever else they were thinking in the back of their head. And again, selfishness is what that is. It's
having already built a positive culture, what were the traits that were missing from there? What did you have in your culture that you knew were the ingredients that were missing?
Freedom. We had freedom. Bro. Freedom. We had freedom, but we also we had open arms, dude. We were servant leaders, and I was building servant leaders. We were an inclusive environment. We didn't care what you looked like, who you were in your past life. We wanted to know what journey you were on now that we could travel with you and be a part of. And that's what we looked for. And that's what the rebellion is. The rebellion isn't just a system that you come and learn. It's us taking your inner rebel and saying, how can we rebel with you? How can we pull it out? How can we shine a light on it? Stop drowning it. Stop muting it. Get loud about it and allow it to be the success that you deserve. And so that's the culture that I built at that organization. And we replicated it in my little bin, in my little 5, 6, 7 man, band. Like, and we did a great job. I mean, that company completely changed course in the time that I was there. We wrote more net new business than they had ever done in years at that point, and for that branch in particular, right? So I mean, it was pretty wild. It was wild what we did, but then I resigned and I started the Sales Rebellion because I realized that you can't fix any of those things like without being the CEO and the board of directors all at the same time, right?
Sure.
So why try to go in there and fix it when I can influence it and influence the next generation coming up? I don't need instant gratification to like fix your company right now. I want souls, bro. I want people. I want to build a kingdom, not a castle.
That's amazing. So what does success look like for the Sales Rebellion? Like 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, where do you see the Sales Rebellion? What's the lasting mark when Dale Dupree is no longer part of it and it's gone? How does it outlive you? What does it look like?
Yeah, so the big picture perspective of it is that the whole purpose of it, man, the whole reason that I started it was because that I wanted to imprint my father on every single person that I got the ability to be in front of that never got to meet him. And so for me, the at the end, for me, it'll be to be able to sit in front of what I've created and say that it's not just something that I had a vision for and that I wanted, but that every single person that came to be involved with it knew the name of my father and felt his love through the process. That to me is going to be the most fulfilling piece of it. And I chase it every day. I chase it every single day. I ask that question when I wake up to myself: are you honoring your father? Those are the things that drive me and motivate me. We don't have a quota at the Sales Rebellion. We have our quota is, it's not a dollar sign, it's lives impacted. So we want to have 100 million people come through the Sales Rebellion and become impacted. We want to have 100 coaches all over the world that are doing that alongside of us. And the numbers will grow over time, right? I mean, in my mind, it was easy to say 1 billion and never get there. But it was hard to say 100 million and then make it happen, right? And so so the thought is that for us, it's every day, when someone rings the gong, it's I've just impacted another life and not I just sold another deal. And because we have this bigger picture perspective of what we're doing, I believe that we've been successful because of it. And I know that we will continue to be successful because it's not our success, man. It's the success of the people whose rebellions that we're helping to lead.
Yeah, I think that's the true definition of success when you talk about leaders is it's not how much success you personally have, it's how many people you influence to have success. So that's incredible. Well, I really, really appreciate you joining the conversation, man. This has been phenomenal. Great nuggets about how to overcome adversity, unbelievable insight into self-evaluation and acceptance and forgiveness and how to be a servant leader. Where can people, if they're interested, where can they find you? Where can they find the rebellion? What do they need to do?
My dad always said, when people can just Google your name and find everything they need, you've done it. So again, like honoring my dad, Google my name and you can find guest podcasts, my website, but it's salesrebellion.com. And if you like content, linkedin.com/IM/copy warrior. I post content daily in there. And I have a podcast called Selling Local as well too. If people want to come and listen to that. And I'm on every single social platform. So you can literally just come and find me anywhere and get different bits and bites of content that's all honoring the rebellion that we're leading.
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you again for joining the conversation. Much appreciated and looking forward to talking to you again soon.
You got it, bro. I appreciate you.